Hello everybody, and welcome to the very first Resonance Reviews review video. You may have not heard of us before, but we've been around since 2016 and have in those almost 10 years reviewed nearly 200 consumer audio products. Today, we're looking at the Kiwi Ears Aether. This is a brand new 15.3 millimeter planner driver embedded in an affordable, or at least relatively affordable, $170 package. And I want to tell you about why I think that the Aether might end up being one of the best earphones of 2025. Let's get into it. So, pros and cons. In terms of pros, the Kiwi Ears Aether has an enormous amount of detail and texture coming from its drivers. It's extraordinarily technically capable, and it's oftentimes going to be performing better than earphones, definitely in its price range, and oftentimes better than those that are more expensive than it. I've tested a number of models, older, newer, doesn't matter. It has excellent detail retrieval, and this is not just about, in the foreground, how detailed does something sound. It's also about, in the background, how quiet can a detail be with the Aether still able to cleanly and discreetly resolve it. It has an exceptionally articulate vocal range, and this is again a derivative of its just propensity to be detailed in the first place. Vocals are that you may not have been able to understand what words are being sung. The Aether excellently resolves in the individual words and inflections in the vocals in your tracks. It is easy to drive. Planner drivers have a reputation for being hard to drive, finicky, power hungry. The Aether is none of those things. You can fully drive this off of an Apple dongle if you really wanted to. And it has beautiful shells, which of course is subjective, but I like the way that these look. As for cons, it has some subpar ear tips included. Ear tips are very, very important. They are basically what makes and breaks how good these earphones will sound for you. In fact, any earphone, if you don't get a good seal, then it's not going to sound good. So these ear tips might work for you, they might not. I found that they were very much average, and there's no foam ear tips included. So if you love to use foam ear tips, you will have to buy those yourself. The included carrying case does not leave a lot of room for accessories or extras. So again, if you're like me and you will carry a USB Type-C adapter in the carrying case with your IEMs, you can do it. It's not going to be a comfortable fit though. And the large shells are ergonomically lacking. That's again a function of the gigantic 15.3 millimeter planner driver that is inside of these earphones. There are other IEMs out there that do have similarly sized 14.2, 14.5 millimeter planner drivers, and they do have better ergonomics. So this is not the best that Kiwi Ears could do, but I guess in pursuit of keeping the price as low as it is, they kind of just went with their standard resin shells, which, is fine. In terms of technical specifications, I mentioned it, it's a 15.3 millimeter neodymium planner dynamic driver. This is a brand new driver. I haven't seen it used anywhere else. I don't believe that Kiwi Ears developed this in-house, but I do believe they are the first ones to use it. The shells have a 0.78 millimeter detachable cable, so if you want to swap out the included cable for an aftermarket cable, or if your cable breaks or tears or wears out, you can just swap it. It comes with a 3.5 millimeter termination, so that's a standard auxiliary jack, and it has an impedance of 14 ohms, which is surprisingly low. There are a lot of earphones out there, dynamic driver earphones even, that are much higher impedance. And it has a sensitivity of 105 decibels per milliwatt. So again, that's not particularly insensitive. It's not very sensitive either. If you think of the Meze Alba, which is another earphone, high quality earphone in this price range, it's going to be an impedance of, I think, 40 ohms and 107 decibels per milliwatt. So it's slightly more sensitive, but at a much higher impedance. With the technical specifications out of the way, let's get into the nitty-gritty a little bit more about how the Aether actually sounds. This is a reference-styled earphone. So it's tuned for studio and professional use, and also coincidentally tuned to the preferences of audiophiles who are seeking maximum performance, maximum detail retrieval, and whatnot. And typically, when you're hearing someone say, oh, that's studio tuning, that's a reference style, that's neutral, you're thinking, is it thin? Is it grainy? Is it sharp? Is it too bright? And that's definitely what I associate with this style of tuning. But the Aether actually doesn't do any of that. It's not thin, it's not grainy, it's not sharp, it's not hot, it's not overly bright. It does actually sound like a perceived neutral, or in my opinion, a slightly north of perceived neutral earphone that is intending to be as transparent and colorless as possible. Its goal is to simply give you what the track wants to give you, what the mastering engineers wanted to give you. Moving on to the mid-range. The Aether's mid-range is very neutral. It's not really perfectly flat. I think that when a lot of times you hear flat mid-range, you're associating that with boring. There is a lift in the upper mid-range designed to give you some extra intelligibility for vocals and some extra detail and separation for instruments. And this is a healthy and normal way to tune it. In fact, perfectly flat mid-ranges to most people, including me, don't sound very good. So I'm glad that Kiwi ears did not actually go with a literally flat mid-range. They went with a neutral mid-range. And it's not just neutral is good, it's that this is a very strong implementation of a neutral mid-range that highlights the Aether's capacity to bring out texture and detail and layering and sound staging. It just does so much, and it does it so well. And if you're used to warm and lush and comfortable sound signatures, you still might want to give this a try. It may not suit your fancy, but again, it's just so good at what it does, it might make you appreciate this style of tuning. So if you can give it a listen and you can demo this, definitely do. Moving on to bass. Planar drivers are not very well known for being good at bass. There's a couple examples of planar earphones that are good at bass, but the vast majority of them are not known for that. They're known for being more treble happy. The Aether is not a bass head earphone. It's reference styled. It's not a fun-tuned earphone, whatever that means. It's not bassy. Its goal is to give you a very real, a very organic, but most importantly, a very articulate display of bass. So when a song that you're listening to asks for rumble, the Aether will actually give you rumble. It might not shake your skull like a bass head earphone would, but it will give you what the track asks for. When an element in your song punches, we're talking, like the kick from a drum, it does actually move air and punch. It, again, is not going to thud into your skull the way that a bassy earphone would, but the tactile sensation is there. And in fact, the bass, I think, is actually the most impressive part about what the Aether is capable of doing, because it highlights such a real and visceral tactility without being exaggerated and overblown, that there are things from bass elements that I'm hearing in tracks that I haven't heard outside of extraordinarily expensive speaker systems and full-sized headphones. And one of those elements you can notice, if you're listening to Joji's Feeling Like the End, at around 52 seconds, there's a bass element that kind of has an exhale effect on it. And this exhale is very subtle. You might miss it even in the Aethers if you are not in like a critical listening situation where you have a quiet environment, strong seal, no distractions. But the Aether actually pushes air in a way that I've not heard any other earphones do it, except for maybe some very, very expensive flagships like perhaps the Astrolith and the Trifecta from Campfire Audio. I've definitely never heard it from balanced armature drivers. So those flagships, even 10 balanced armature drivers, 12, I haven't heard anything like that. And it was honestly kind of crazy to hear. And again, it's that level of control and that level of proficiency throughout the entire sonic spectrum that makes this so special. And again, it's only $170. It's not $1,000. It's not $500. It's not $400. That really is a big part of the reason why I feel so strongly that this is a special earphone. And moving on to build. So $170 sounds amazing. The compromise had to come somewhere. And I wouldn't necessarily call the Aether's build compromised. I would just say that it's not as premium as you might find for some slightly more expensive competitors. And that really does show through in that the Aether has mostly plastic shells. So the faceplate is plastic. The majority of the body is plastic. The only part that is not plastic, mercifully, are the nozzles, and those are made out of metal. The mesh filter inside the nozzle, also metal. So those are very, very important parts to get right, because when they're made out of plastic or resin, they are often the very first parts of the shell that fails. It's either that or it's right where the cable sits on the shell. So in this case, that would be the 2-pin 0.78 millimeter sockets. So it would either have been the shell or where the sockets are. Metal shell really circumvents a lot of that. So I'm glad that Kiwi ears went with a metal nozzle. It's pretty well assembled. The common quality control issues that you might have found with some very cheap Chinese earphones or maybe even cheap Western brands, you will not find that with the Aether, or at least I did not. It was very, very clean. So the fit and finish is excellent, as it has been with pretty much all of my Kiwi earphones, really regardless of price. The cable that comes with the Aether is a standard black plastic cable. Again, it's 0.78 millimeter 2-pin where it connects to the earphone side. It is a 3.5 millimeter jack on the termination side. And you know, it's very standard. The Aether is such a great earphone. It's such a special earphone that I was hoping we'd get a slightly nicer cable, maybe something like the silver one that came with the Kiwi Ears Orchestra Lite. That is a more expensive earphone. I do understand that, but I was hoping for something a little bit fancier. The good news is, though, is you can just swap it if you don't like it. There's nothing wrong with this cable. It's fine. You know, no need to belabor the point. And in terms of power, I mentioned it, that the Aether is only 14 ohms. That's pretty low impedance. Yeah, and compared to maybe some balanced armature driver earphones, it's not that low. But again, the Meze Alba, that's 40 ohms. This is 14. It's pretty low, and it's not that much less sensitive than typical large dynamic drivers. It's about 2 decibels of SPL per milliwatt less, which really is not much. You can power this off of a Apple dongle. It's $10. I really don't recommend buying any expensive fancy power source or adapters or dongles for the Aether. It doesn't need it. It really doesn't. The Alba doesn't need it. Very few in-ears actually do require much more than an Apple dongle. So again, if you are interested in that world, or you do need a new one and you don't want the Apple dongle because maybe it's too flimsy or it has poor build quality, I do agree with you on that. Please don't spend $100. You don't need to. Just look at the measurements. If a manufacturer does not supply you with measurements and you cannot find any third-party trustworthy reviews that actually go into scientific objective measurements of performance, do not buy it. You don't need it for this. Definitely do not. And in terms of comfort, so the Aether has large shells. As I mentioned, if you have small ears, you won't be able to fit it in your ears very well. If you have very small ear canals, you probably won't get a comfortable fit because these nozzles are a little bit deeper than average and they're a little bit wider than average. In terms of accessories, you get 9 pairs of silicone ear tips or silicone ear tips. You get a carrying case, you get the cable. This is a standard accessory suite. For $170, Kiwi ears could have done better. There are peers in this price range that do better. But again, the performance ratio, the price to performance ratio for the Aether is so extreme that I can actually forgive this absence of foam ear tips. I can forgive the very much average silicone ear tips that are included. I can forgive the smallish case. But if this didn't perform as well, this would be more of an irritation. Okay, let's talk conclusion. It's no secret that I like the Aether. I've made it very clear at this point. I really do like it. It has an incredible price to performance ratio. It has excellent tonal balance. It's got, I would say, class-leading bass control and tuning. It has vastly superior technical capacity compared to its peers. It outperforms pretty much every other planar driver earphone, even remotely close in price, that I've heard. The only areas where this could be improved are perhaps if there was a more expensive iteration of this that had a more robust accessory package, more premium materials for the shells. I mean, that's really it. You're talking some very minor deficiencies in accessory sophistication and the use of a basic resin over metal or one of the higher quality resins found on like the Phi Audio line. But other than that, really, I think the Aether is for the people who it's aimed at, virtually flawless. You're not going to find the common issues with Chinese planar driver earphones. So with that, let me be very specific about who I think this is for. I think that this is for audiophiles who want or enjoy reference grade sound. That is to say, neutral sound signatures. This is not literally neutral. It is slightly north of neutral, and I think it does just the right amount of emphasis subtly in various different spots to enhance the sound signature without making it sound colored. I think this is for planar driver enthusiasts who may already have planar driver earphones, but mostly I think this is for audiophiles or listeners who have planar driver headphones and want an earphone that evokes the same kind of sensations of speed and precision and performance that those planar driver headphones have. And I wouldn't go so far as to say that the Aether is equivalent or a replacement for those very high-end setups, but I would say that it's just gonna give you the same, I hate to use this word, but it's gonna give you the same vibe as if you had those full-sized headphones. Again, not the same performance necessarily, but it's gonna give you the same feeling, the same sensations. And I think, again, that's what makes the Aether so special. Now, who this is not for? This is not for listeners who have small ears. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, it's probably not gonna fit very well for you. And if it doesn't fit well, it's not going to sound as good as it would if it fitted properly. This is not for listeners who are used to warm sound signatures. If you're used to those neutrally warm, very smooth sound signatures, the Aether probably won't sound very good to you. If you enjoy bassy sound signatures, you're going to find its bass lacking. It does have that 1 to 2 decibel lift right around the 200 hertz range, but it's not going to be enough to satisfy you if you're used to those very bassy earphones like Fat Frequency or some of its other bassy peers. So it's not for everybody, but it will make most people happy. I would say if you're not a dedicated bass head, this will sound great. If you haven't taken your first steps into high-end audio yet, this is going to sound great. You're going to hear things you've never heard before. Even if you're like me and you have a lot of experience listening to high-end audio, you still might hear things you've never heard before. That's how good these are. That's how articulate they are. So give it a shot. If you can demo it, definitely demo it. If you can get this from a vendor that offers free returns, like a 14-day window, give it a shot. It doesn't need any burn-in, doesn't need fancy sources, nothing like that, hassle-free. Give it a shot. With that, I would like to thank you very much for watching Resonance Review's very first review video. I know it's kind of scuffed, the editing's not great, my picture quality is okay, so I'm still learning cinematography, and I'm going to do my best to get that improved as I gain some experience, and I appreciate your patience and your time. If you'd like to view more of my work, you can do so at resonancereviews.com. There's no dash, no space. That's a single chunk, resonancereviews.com. All of my reviews are on there. If you'd like to view them chronologically, you can just scroll through my Medium profile, which is on there. If you'd like to see some of the discussions I'm having with other audiophiles and reviewers, you can do so on HeadFi. My profile on there is Cinder. So please do go ahead and give them a look. And again, I've said it a couple times, but really I do appreciate your time. Thank you for watching. And as always, happy listening.